Hi, my name's Gareth, and just 3 days ago, I was a husband, a provider, a man who believed love meant loyalty, until I heard my in-laws laugh behind my back. That stupid fat man makes us sick. And my wife? She didn't defend me. She smirked and said, I only care about his money anyway. I didn't say a word, but the next morning, I sold everything. The house, the stocks, the life I built, and then I vanished. They think I'm lost, but they have no idea what I left behind or what's coming. Saturday night in Los Angeles always carries a kind of noise, traffic humming, laughter spilling from patios, the low thud of bass from passing cars. That night, though, everything around me felt muffled. Marina had called earlier, her tone clipped but polite. Dad wants us at dinner, she'd said. It's important. Please just come, okay? I asked if everything was all right. She paused for a second too long before replying. Of course, it's just dinner. By 7:30, I was standing outside the Glass House, a restaurant that gleamed like it was built to impress. Marina waved me over from the table by the window. Her family was already there. Her father, Douglas, talking loudly enough for the room to know who he was. Her mother, Eleanor, scanning the menu like she might find someone's soul in it. Her brother, Aaron, scrolling his phone without shame. Gareth, Douglas greeted me, his voice booming. Didn't think you'd make it on time. Wouldn't miss it, I said, forcing a smile. Marina didn't look up right away. The waiter came over, mispronouncing my last name. Mr. Lorne? Lorne, I corrected softly. He nodded, but no one else did. They just kept talking. Marina's hand brushed mine beneath the table. It was brief, mechanical, almost. Her nails tapped against the wine glass like she was counting seconds. I listened to Douglas talk about real estate, about markets and politics, and how people who can't keep up should just accept their place. Eleanor laughed, her voice sharp and thin. I tried to join in once, said something about a new development I was consulting on. Douglas didn't respond. Aaron chuckled, eyes still on his phone. Then came the moment that sliced everything open. Douglas leaned back, looking me over like I was a product on clearance. You know, he said, people these days really let themselves go. Health's important, son. Can't buy that with money. The words hung there, sticky and deliberate. Aaron smirked. Don't worry, Dad. He's harmless. Just heavy. Laughter. Real laughter. From all of them. I looked at Marina. I waited for her to say something, to roll her eyes, to tell them to stop. But she just smiled. Not nervously, not protectively. She smiled like she'd been waiting for this moment. Then her mother leaned closer to her, voice low but clear enough to carry. That stupid fat man makes us sick. And Marina, my wife, laughed. She tilted her head, resting her chin on her palm. I only care about his money anyway. Something inside me cracked, but quietly. I didn't say a word. The waiter came by, asking if I wanted more coffee. I nodded. My hand trembled slightly when I reached for the cup. The coffee was cold. I stirred it once, the spoon clinking against porcelain. It's cold already, I said softly. No point stirring it anymore. No one heard me, or maybe they did and chose silence. I sat there, smiling like a ghost at my own funeral, nodding at jokes that no longer reached me. The sound of their laughter turned hollow, like something echoing down an empty hall. Inside, I was somewhere else entirely, watching myself from a distance. That's when the truth settled in. I wasn't part of this family. I was the joke they kept feeding. Marina's laughter became a rhythm I couldn't forget. I memorized it, not because I wanted to, but because I knew it was the sound that would end everything. I reached into my wallet, fingers brushing against an old prayer card, one my mother gave me years ago before she passed. Her handwriting was fading, but the words never did. God sees you, even when people choose not to. For a moment, I almost laughed myself. It was all so absurd. The check came. I paid it without looking at the total, left a tip that probably covered more kindness than the entire table ever offered me. Then I stood up, buttoned my jacket, and said, "Excuse me." Douglas looked mildly annoyed that I interrupted him. Marina didn't look up. I walked out. The valet handed me my keys, asked if I wanted my ticket validated. "No," I said, "just the car." The city lights blurred as I drove, one after another, like tiny apologies I didn't believe. That night, I didn't go home. I just drove until the laughter in my head finally went quiet. By the time the first light seeped through the curtains, I had already parked the car in front of the house, but never went inside. I slept in the driver's seat, or maybe I didn't sleep at all. I remember staring at the edge of the steering wheel like it might offer answers. My neck ached. My back had locked up from the position, but I didn't care. The sun was climbing higher when I finally stepped inside. The house was quiet. Too quiet for something that cost nearly $10 million. Marble floors, imported fixtures, custom art on the walls, but not a sound of warmth, not a trace of life. I headed straight for the kitchen, made coffee out of habit more than need. As the machine hissed and sputtered, I leaned against the counter, staring at nothing. That's when the phone buzzed. Marina. I let it ring twice before answering. "Morning," she said, like we'd shared toast just an hour ago. "You left so early last night. Daddy thought maybe you weren't feeling well." Her voice was soft, light, detached in a way that almost made me think I imagined what happened. I waited a beat before replying. "I wasn't feeling anything, actually." There was a pause, but not the kind where someone processes pain or shame. No, this was the sound of her checking whether I'd turned the page already, whether I was still the quiet man she could mock and expect to stay. "Well, anyway," she chirped, "we're having brunch at the club later if you want to stop by." I hung up. The silence that followed felt heavier than her words. I didn't feel relief, not anger either, just a widening space inside me that used to hold love. I brought my coffee into the office, sat at the desk where we once signed the papers that made us husband and wife, and now I understood, made her part owner of everything I'd built. The documents were still there. Deeds, joint accounts, trust forms. Her name was on all of them. Every conversation about finances came flooding back. "It's just safer this way," Douglas had said, handing me a pen with a grin that now felt like a trapdoor. "Family unity, you know," Marina had chimed in. "It's not about control, Gareth. It's about partnership." Now it was obvious. I had funded their kingdom, and I wasn't even welcome at the gate. I murmured to the empty room, "I bought the cage. They just locked the door." I stared at the signed documents until the lines blurred. My fingers drummed the desk. I opened a drawer, looking for something, maybe a pen, maybe a reason. Instead, I found the prayer card again, my mother's. I hadn't looked at the back of it in years. Today, I flipped it over. Faint ink, nearly erased by time, spelled out her handwriting. "If they mock you, don't fight for their laughter. Fight for your peace." I read it 3 times, then again, whispering it aloud. Something shifted. Not a storm, but the first breeze before it. A plan didn't form yet, but something like clarity did. Not revenge, Not even escape. Just a need to take back what was mine. Not the money, not the house. Just myself. I stood, pocketed the card. Then I walked out onto the patio. The sun was out now, full and blinding. One of the gardeners waved. "Morning, Mr. Lorne." "Morning," I answered, voice steady. He went back to pruning hedges, unaware that the man sipping coffee 10 feet away wouldn't be here much longer. The neighborhood looked exactly as it always did. Perfect hedges, still fountains, million-dollar homes with million-dollar silences. Inside, I felt calmer than I had in months. They thought my silence was weakness. They never understood. It's what I do before I move. By noon, I'd already made 3 calls, one to my lawyer, one to my banker, and one to myself. By the time I left Los Angeles, the freeway shimmered under the noon heat. My mind was quiet, almost too quiet. The kind of silence that comes when you've already made peace with the worst possibilities. The drive to Santa Barbara took just under 2 hours. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't need noise, just the rhythm of tires against asphalt and the occasional thought that I might be driving into something I didn't want to see. Malcolm's office was in a glass-fronted building on State Street, 2nd floor. The name Vale and Lorne LLP gleamed in polished brass by the door. Seeing Vale beside our family name twisted something in me I couldn't name. Still, I walked in. The receptionist looked up, startled. "Mr. Lorne, your brother's expecting you. Go right in." The office smelled like old books and lemon polish. Malcolm was standing by the window, phone in hand, a smile practiced enough to pass for warmth. "Gar," he said, slipping the phone into his pocket. "It's been a long time. You look tired." "That's one word for it," I replied. He gestured toward the leather chair opposite his desk. "Sit. Coffee?" "No, thanks." For a moment, we just looked at each other. The space between us was heavy with all the things we hadn't said for years. Holidays skipped, calls unanswered, his silence whenever Marina's name came up. Finally, I spoke. "I need some advice." His brows lifted. "About?" I told him everything. The dinner. The laughter. The words I could still hear like echoes carved into my skull. I didn't dramatize it. I just laid it out plain. Then I told him my plan. To start separating assets quietly, without confrontation. Malcolm listened without interrupting, fingers steepled beneath his chin. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Gar," he began carefully, "maybe you're overreacting. Marina's family. They're powerful people. You don't want to make this messy." I studied his face. "Messy," I repeated. "They humiliate me in public, and you're worried about messy?" He sighed. "Look, you've always been emotional when it comes to pride. Don't do something that'll come back to bite you. I can help mediate, maybe get Douglas to apologize." "Douglas," I cut in. "Since when do you call him Douglas?" He froze, just for a fraction of a second, but I caught it. That half blink of someone who's said too much. My gaze drifted to his desk. A folder sat slightly open near his right hand. The letterhead on the top page read, "Vale Holdings, Inc." "You're doing work for them?" I asked quietly. He hesitated. "Just small contracts, corporate compliance. Don't read too much into it." The air went still. Even the hum of the ceiling fan seemed to fade. I nodded slowly. "Of course. Why would I?" He smiled, too quickly. "Exactly." A few minutes later, his phone buzzed. "Excuse me, Gar. I need to take this." He stepped into the hallway, door left half closed. I sat there, staring at the folder. My hand moved before my brain could catch up. I slid it toward me and opened it. Inside were transaction records, partnership agreements, offshore transfers, all signed under Lorne Consulting, LLC, my company, my name. It took a moment for the realization to settle. Malcolm hadn't just been working with them, he'd been helping them move money under my identity. Every joint account Marina convinced me to open, every signature I'd trusted him to review. It was all tied together. No anger, no panic. Just that same quiet that had followed me since the restaurant. When he came back in, I had already closed the folder and placed it exactly where it had been. He looked uneasy. "Everything okay?" I met his eyes and said, calm as stone, "I thought I could trust blood over marriage. Seems I was wrong both times." His mouth opened, but nothing came out. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and walked to the door. "Gar, wait." But I didn't. I walked out, past the receptionist who smiled politely, down the stairs, into the sun. By the time I reached the car, my hands had stopped shaking. I sat behind the wheel for a long time, watching the reflection of the office in the rearview mirror. That's when the last bridge burned without fire, I thought. It just disappeared under my feet. The drive back to Los Angeles felt shorter than it should have. I didn't think about Marina, or Malcolm, or Douglas. I thought about the prayer card still in my wallet and how my mother's words weren't just comfort, they were direction. By the time I reached Los Angeles, I knew exactly what I had to do, and who would help me do it. I didn't go straight home after Santa Barbara. I stopped at a small diner on the way back, ordered coffee I didn't touch, and stared out the window until the sun dipped low behind the skyline. That brief pause was all I needed. Not to rest, there was no rest left in me, but to settle into what came next. The rooftop bar was tucked between two high-rises downtown, the kind of place you wouldn't notice unless someone told you it was there. I hadn't been in touch with Celeste in nearly 20 years. One message, a simple, "Can we meet? I need your discretion," and she replied in less than 10 minutes. She was already at a table when I arrived, legs crossed, glass of something amber in her hand. She hadn't aged so much as evolved, short-cropped hair, sharp eyes behind matte-rimmed glasses, and that same quiet confidence I remembered from college. "You look like hell, Gareth," she said without getting up. "Feels worse than it looks," I replied, sliding into the chair opposite hers. She gave me a once-over, not unkindly, then nodded toward the bartender. "Still bourbon? Or are you drinking regrets now?" "Neither. Just answers." Celeste didn't waste time with small talk. "Start at the beginning. Tell me everything." I told her about Marina, her family, the dinner, my brother. I didn't dress it up, just the facts, clean and steady. She listened the way she used to, eyes locked, fingers still, brain working 5 moves ahead. When I finished, she leaned back. "So, they finally did it. I warned you back in grad school. Marry into money and they'll charge you interest." I managed a half smile. Took me a while to realize I was the loan. She pulled out a tablet and placed it on the table between us. "You're not the first man they've bled dry. The Vales run a very consistent playbook. Merge finances, insulate through shell companies, then withdraw quietly while the other party is too distracted to notice. Screens lit up, names, account trails, offshore movements. My name, more than once. Malcolm's, too. I didn't flinch. "You don't fight people like this with anger," Celeste said, tapping the screen. "You fight them with math." That was the first time I smirked in days. You always did love numbers more than people. People lie. Numbers just sit there and wait for someone to read them. She paused, letting that settle, then continued. "Here's what we do. 3 phases. First, we move every liquid asset you still have access to, quietly. No red flags, no sudden movements. We bleed the accounts like a leaky faucet, not a broken pipe. I nodded. Second, freeze the real estate. Shared properties go into legal gridlock. Delays, inspections, compliance reviews. You'll look like a man sorting paperwork, not planning an exit. And third, I asked. She looked me dead in the eyes. You disappear. Not physically, digitally. No traceable activity, no habits, no signals. The day after we're done, if they search for you, all they'll find is a dead end. I didn't answer right away. The idea of vanishing used to scare me. Now it sounded like freedom. Celeste leaned in, voice low. Once you start this, you can't go back. You'll be a ghost. They already treated me like one, I said. Might as well make it official. She nodded, then pushed the tablet toward me. Good. Then here's your first move. It's a small wire transfer. Won't raise any alarms, but it'll open the door. I tapped the screen, memorized the steps, the logic, the beauty in how quiet it all was. I used to think silence meant surrender, I said after a while. You've reminded me. It can mean strategy. Celeste smiled, then lit a cigarette. The bar didn't care. No one up there did. Behind her, the city turned gold, then orange, then navy. The lights flicked on in rows, a hum of electricity spreading across the skyline like veins. Funny thing about sunsets, she said, exhaling slowly. They look peaceful, but they're the biggest burn of the day. I watched the last light dip behind the buildings and felt something in me shift. It wasn't rage. It wasn't fear. It was something clearer, cleaner. By the time the city went dark, my decision was already made. I drove home with the windows down. The air was cool, sharper than it had been in weeks, and it hit my face like truth. I didn't turn the radio on. I didn't need noise. Silence had become the clearest language I spoke. It was just past midnight when I stepped back into the house, the kind of quiet that wrapped itself around your neck. No hum of appliances, no soft footsteps from upstairs, just me and the vast emptiness of everything I used to believe in. I poured a glass of water, didn't drink it, walked to my study, flicked on the desk lamp, and opened the laptop. And then I started. Celeste's instructions had been clear. I followed them to the letter. One by one, the layers peeled back. Bank portals, investment dashboards, digital subscriptions, auto-pay settings, insurance policies. Each login, each password, each click chipped away at a version of me that had existed too long. Every click felt like an incision. I wasn't just deleting data. I was amputating parts of my life. A vacation album from Napa. Gone. The cloud backup from our 5th anniversary erased. Shared spreadsheets, financial plans, grocery lists. Even the Spotify playlist she made called G&M Sunday Vibes. Deleted. The house, though still standing, was beginning to feel less like mine and more like a waiting room. I looked at the clock. 12:37 a.m. The silence was louder than any fight we'd ever had. I stood, walked through the hallway slowly, barefoot, careful not to make a sound, though there was no one left to wake. The walls were lined with frames, a photo of Marina at Lake Como, another of us at some gala neither of us had wanted to attend. Her smile in those photos had always looked polished. Now it looked rehearsed. I stopped in front of one, us on the front porch, champagne glasses raised, a sold sign behind us. The day we bought this house. I remember what I'd said to her. I want this place to make you feel safe. I whispered now. This place never protected me. I was just paying rent for my own humiliation. In the kitchen, I poured myself coffee from the pot I'd made before driving to see Celeste. It had gone cold. Again. The bitterness was somehow comforting. I took one sip and left the rest. Back in the study, I turned to my email, my personal account, the one I rarely used anymore. I was about to delete it when I saw the drafts folder. One message sat there, untouched for years. The subject, "If you ever leave." I didn't remember writing it, but it was mine. I opened it. "If you ever stop loving me, please tell me to my face. I can survive the truth, but not the laughter." I stared at the words, read them twice, then deleted it. Now I finally understood the difference. Leaving doesn't always look like a slammed door. Sometimes it's just a dinner table, a quiet smirk, a silence too sharp to be accidental. I shut the lid of the laptop and stood again. On the way out of the room, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. For once, I didn't look away. Unshaven, tired, but strangely still. There was no more scrambling, no more trying to win something that was never mine to begin with. "You look like a man who finally stopped apologizing," I muttered. And for the first time in what felt like years, I smiled. Not wide, just enough. Back at the desk, I reopened the laptop. There were only a few steps left. The offshore transfers Celeste had helped prepare were queued, disguised under layers of shell movement. The encryption software was open. I routed through a private server, triggered the final automation, asset freeze notices, delayed title transfers, communication blackout. A blinking cursor waited on one final message from Celeste. "Once you hit send," it read, "there's no coming back." I typed slowly. I was never here anyway. Then I pressed the key. The screen flickered, then went black. The silence now was complete. By dawn, I no longer existed. Not online, not on paper, not in her world. By the time the motel clock blinked past 2 p.m., the fog rolling in off the ocean had swallowed most of the view. I'd been up since dawn, sitting on the edge of the bed, back hunched, eyes locked on nothing in particular. The only sound in the room was the muted hum of an old fridge and the occasional groan of shifting wood. It's strange how freedom smells, like dust, salt, and old sheets. The carpet was worn thin near the door. The curtains didn't quite close all the way. The lamp on the nightstand flickered every now and then, as if unsure it still had purpose. I turned on the television for background noise, just static at first, until I flipped channels and landed on a news anchor sitting behind polished glass. And there I was. A photo of me from some charity event, wearing the suit Marina had picked out. The headline underneath read, "Gareth Lorne missing. Police suspect, foul play." I leaned forward. Next came Marina. Hair curled just so, makeup perfect, eyes damp. She clutched a tissue as if on cue. "If anyone has seen my husband," she said, voice trembling, "please. We just want him home. This isn't like him. Gareth loves his work, his family. He wouldn't just walk away." Beside her sat her parents, Harold and Evelyn Vale, both silent, both expressionless in the way only practiced liars could be. They didn't need to speak. Their presence alone was a performance. "They made me a ghost," I said quietly, "and now they're hunting my shadow." A soft ping vibrated from the burner phone on the nightstand. I picked it up, an encrypted message from Celeste. "See, they've filed a legal motion to access joint accounts, citing your disappearance as grounds for emergency control." Attached was a headline, "Gareth Lorne under investigation for financial misconduct. Family cooperating." My jaw tightened, but I didn't flinch. I just stared. The screen burned white, then dimmed. "They stole the money," I whispered. "And now they want the narrative too." There was something obscene about it. How quickly they'd crafted a version of me that fit their needs. I wasn't missing. I was accused. A convenient mess they could mop up with enough crocodile tears and camera time. I stood, needing air. Slipping on my jacket, I stepped out into the wind. The coastal town was quiet, the kind of place where everything closed early and no one asked questions. A gull cried overhead. The ocean stretched wide, endless. I followed a narrow path behind the motel, leading to the edge of a rocky cliff. The water below foamed against stone with restless rhythm. I picked up a smooth pebble from the path, turned it over in my hand, then flicked it into the sea. That's for every word I didn't say. I used to believe that silence was a form of weakness, that if you didn't speak, someone else would write your ending. But now I saw it differently. Silence, wielded well, could be power. Back in the room, the TV still played, but I wasn't watching anymore. Celeste messaged again. "See, lay low. They're pushing media coverage. They want to flush you out." Me. Let them. Because every move they made was another mistake logged. Every lie they told to the public layered their story in cracks, and cracks let light in. Still, I felt the pressure tightening. Disappearing was easy. Staying disappeared, staying in control. That was the real trick. I made coffee with the motel's dented machine. It tasted like metal and regret, but it kept me grounded. My thoughts wandered to Malcolm, to his face when I closed that file folder and walked out, to his silence. I wondered if he was watching the news, wondering whether I'd come back swinging or vanish like smoke. Let them all wonder. I lay down on the bed, staring up at the ceiling fan. It didn't spin. Then, headlights. Through the window's edge, two beams pierced the fog, slow, creeping. The gravel crunch of tires stopped just outside my room. My breath hitched, not fear, just focus. I moved quietly, killed the lights, and slid a hand toward my bag beneath the bed. Celeste had insisted on a second identity packet. I hadn't needed it, until maybe now. Someone had found me, and it wasn't the police. A gust of wind pushed against the motel door, rattling it in its frame as thunder rolled across the cliffs. I stayed perfectly still, one hand near the edge of the nightstand drawer. The headlights had gone out, but the car hadn't moved. Then came the knock. 3 steady taps, not rushed, not afraid. It was the kind of knock that said, "I already know you're in there." I approached the door slowly, checking the chain. "Who is it?" I asked. A familiar voice, quieter than I remembered, answered. "It's me, Gar. Open up." I didn't move right away. Another crash of thunder shook the window. I slid the chain off and opened the door a few inches. There he stood, Malcolm, drenched, his coat heavy with rain, dark rings under his eyes, a leather briefcase clutched in his left hand like it weighed more than guilt. "You don't make it easy to find you," he said, trying for a smirk that didn't land. That was the point. I let him in, mostly because I wanted to know how far this game had stretched. He stepped inside, dripping water onto the stained carpet. I closed the door and turned the lock. He took in the room, the cheap furniture, the dim lamp, the humming fridge, and shook his head. From Beverly Hills to Big Sur. Quite a fall. I didn't answer. He dropped the soaked briefcase onto the table and took off his coat, draping it over the back of a chair. "They're not just dragging your name through the mud," he said. They're liquidating everything, claiming you fled under pressure, using that to push through power of attorney. Marina's saying you were acting erratic, that you had episodes. Sounds rehearsed, I said. It is. They're trying to erase you, Gareth. And if you don't respond soon, they'll succeed. I sat on the edge of the bed, arms crossed. So you're here to warn me, or finish what you started. He winced like I'd slapped him. I deserve that. But no, I'm here because... He unlatched the briefcase and opened it slowly. Inside were files, photos, and a small USB drive. His hand hovered over it before sliding it toward me. I couldn't do it anymore, he said. Not after what I found out. I stayed still. They didn't rope me in because I believed in them, he continued. They had leverage, old deals, bad timing. But Marina, she was the one pulling the strings, not her father, not Evelyn. She's the one who pushed for everything. She manipulated me like she manipulated you. He opened one of the folders, emails, texts, call logs, then tapped the USB. This has everything. Voice messages, a video. She talks to one of her lawyers, laughing, says she married you for the challenge, said you were always too polite to see it coming. I didn't flinch, but the room tilted slightly. I reached for the drive, but didn't plug it in. Not yet. I didn't need to hear it to know it was real. His voice told me that much. The look in his eyes was the rest. I thought I was protecting myself, he said, sinking into the chair, but all I did was feed her power. I stood slowly. You can't save yourself by betraying blood, I said, but you can stop feeding her. Malcolm didn't argue. He looked smaller somehow, like something had finally collapsed inside him. I picked up the USB and slipped it into my coat pocket. You should go. If they find out you came here, you'll be next. He nodded, stood, and without another word, walked to the door. Before he left, he turned once, looked at me like a man trying to apologize without using the word, then disappeared into the storm. Outside, his car pulled away into the fog. I watched the red taillights fade, then flicker out. A moment later, the lights in the room went dark. I didn't jump, just walked to the table, pulled a candle from my bag, and lit it. The flame wobbled in the wind, leaking through the old window frame. The storm outside raged louder now, wind howling, waves crashing against rock, thunder rolling again and again like some ancient warning. I looked at the USB in my hand. The truth doesn't come quietly, I murmured. It tears through you, like thunder finding ground. I didn't plug it in yet. I just sat there, the candle casting long shadows on the walls, holding the evidence that would end their carefully rehearsed story. By dawn, I knew exactly how to end their performance, once and for all, and it would start with a video, the one they'd never see coming. I spent the rest of that morning in quiet preparation. The motel was still, the waves crashing below my window now familiar, not unsettling. Celeste's encrypted server blinked back at me with a simple countdown. 8, 12, 56, 55, 54. The time we'd chosen was deliberate. Thursday evening, during the Vale's annual charity gala. It was their biggest event of the year, a celebration of fabricated kindness wrapped in expensive gowns and false gratitude. What better stage? The file was scheduled to go live at exactly 7:03 p.m., just as Marina would be stepping to the podium, basking in applause, mistaking attention for admiration. Meanwhile, I'd be miles away, seated at a chipped motel table, watching on a second-hand laptop, candle burning low beside me. They wanted the spotlight, I whispered, leaning back in the creaky chair. I just made sure the light was honest. The gala opened with a red carpet and champagne. Cameras flashed nonstop. Marina wore a deep sapphire gown, tailored to perfection, like everything else in her life. She posed with her parents, both standing tall, proud, delusional. Inside, the ballroom glowed gold. Crystal chandeliers, floral arches, the usual opulence. At 7:01, the MC invited Marina to speak. The crowd hushed. "Tonight," she began, "we celebrate the power of family, the strength of unity, and above all, trust." I almost laughed. "Without trust," she continued, "we lose the foundation that holds us together, in our homes, in our communities, in our hearts." And right on cue, 7:03, the screen behind her flickered. It started with a still frame. My face, quiet, steady. "My name is Gareth Lorne." My voice filled the room, calm, measured. "You may know me as the man they said disappeared." Gasps rippled through the audience. Marina froze mid-sentence. The microphone in her hand trembled slightly. The screen lit up with a series of clips, evidence neatly arranged. Malcolm's confession came first. Face blurred, voice altered, but unmistakably real. "They threatened me. They promised immunity if I helped." Marina, she was the one behind it all. Next, screenshots of offshore transfers, shell companies traced to Marina and her family, timelines of fraudulent claims. Then came the final blow, Marina's own recorded messages, her laughter. "I married him for sport," she said in one clip, sipping wine. "He was too naive to even see it coming, but useful for a while." The room went silent. No one moved. Cameras kept rolling. Her mask crumbled in real time, the audience witnessing the collapse of a performance she'd rehearsed for years. She stepped back from the podium, face pale, frozen in place. Her father reached for her arm, but she didn't move. Evelyn Vale clutched her pearls, blinking rapidly. As the footage ended, my voice returned one final time. "Silence isn't weakness. It's just patience, waiting for the right audience." And the screen went dark. I imagined the chaos before it happened, but the reality outpaced even my expectations. Reporters surged forward. Police officers, tipped off by Celeste seconds before the video aired, entered through the side entrance. Marina's mother fainted. Douglas Vale tried shouting over the noise, but no one listened. The Vale's dynasty, curated over decades, unraveled in less than 4 minutes. And I didn't need to be there. I had already said everything that mattered. Back at the motel, I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I sat in silence, watching the aftermath unfold on a small news live stream. Beside me, a cup of coffee sat untouched, gone cold hours ago. Some things stay cold for a reason. I reached into my wallet and pulled out the old prayer card I'd kept tucked behind my ID for years. It wasn't about religion. It was about memory, about a time when I believed in the people closest to me. I laid it gently beside the coffee. Outside, the wind had picked up again. The waves beat harder against the rocks, but I barely noticed. The storm was behind me now. The performance was over. By the time the video ended, I was already gone. And I didn't wait to watch the fallout. Didn't need to see Marina's face crack in real time. I had seen it enough. In private, in silence, in my memory. It was never about revenge. Just truth. Quiet and final. I headed north under gray skies, avoiding highways, keeping to winding roads carved into the cliffs. The air felt different the farther I drove from Los Angeles, less filtered, more honest. By the time I reached the edge of Carmel by the sea, the sky had cleared, the wind softer. I rented a small cliffside cottage tucked behind a grove of Monterey pines, paid cash, no name on file. The ocean greeted me each morning now, not as a force, not as a metaphor, just there, present, alive. It was Friday morning when I first let myself breathe without looking over my shoulder. The cottage was quiet, save for the hum of an old fridge and the rhythmic crash of waves. The scent of sea salt mixed with faint pine and something warm from the sun filtering through the open window. "It's strange," I murmured aloud, "how the world keeps spinning after everything ends, like it doesn't even notice what it buried." I lived simply here. Mornings were for walking the coast, afternoons for reading old books that smelled of dust and wisdom, nights for silence. I had no need for clocks. Time had already done what it came to do. The radio, old and half-rusted, sat on the windowsill. I turned it on sometimes, not for news, but for voices. Human voices, even filtered through static, reminded me I was still part of something. This morning, the station was local, reporting snippets between jazz numbers and traffic updates. Vale family still under federal investigation for embezzlement, forgery, and tax fraud. I stirred my tea. Gareth Lorne's disappearance remains unsolved. Authorities consider it a closed case. I smiled. "They wanted me gone," I said quietly. "I just made sure they got what they wished for." The wind outside shifted, carrying gull cries and something older, more settled. I stood, walked to the drawer by the small writing desk, and opened it. Inside was a single folded paper, the only thing I'd left behind when I vanished. The note. I read it again, even though I knew it by heart. "Don't look for me. You already lost me the day you laughed." I folded it slowly, then slid it into the pages of a worn copy of The Old Man and the Sea. Hemingway had understood something most people never do, that dignity can survive defeat, and solitude isn't the same as loneliness. That book and I had something in common now. Outside, the tide was pulling in. The clouds were thin, streaked with golden morning light. I stepped outside, the cool earth beneath my bare feet grounding me in the present. In my hand, the prayer card I'd carried for years. The edges were worn, the ink faded, but it had stayed with me through it all. I walked to the cliff's edge. The sea stretched endlessly, calm now, not angry. I held the card up to the breeze. "Forgiveness isn't forgetting," I whispered. "It's remembering without bleeding." And I let it go. The card twisted in the wind, caught a current, and vanished toward the water. I didn't follow it with my eyes. I didn't need to. As I turned back toward the cottage, I saw a figure on the path. A local fisherman, gray beard, cap low on his forehead, lifting a hand in greeting. "Morning, sir," he called. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" I nodded. "Best one I've had in a long time." He smiled, then continued down the trail toward the beach. Simple, honest. I stepped inside. The screen door clicked shut behind me. The cottage settled again into its quiet rhythm. No headlines, no voices raised in judgment, no lies cracking beneath the surface. Just silence. And for the first time in years, the silence didn't hurt. It healed.